iHeartRadio podcast. Chris Harrison coming to you from the home office in Austin, Texas. And today's episode is a continuation of my conversation with Colton Underwood, the former bachelor who famously jumped the fence in Portugal and took off into the night with me trying to keep up with him. But we talked to Colton about he and his husband, Jordan, having a baby, the joyous news that we got, and we are so happy for him. They are going to be incredible parents, and I'm so excited. And there was one other layer to this I wanted to get to, because as much as Colton and I have talked, one thing we haven't done publicly is talk about his time on The Bachelor. Does he have any regrets? Did he know he was gay coming into this? Was there any time when he wanted to just scream from the rooftop, stop filming? As much as we have discussed, we've never really publicly gotten into this in his time on the show. And I had a lot of questions for him. So I want to continue my conversation with Colton Underwood. You know, getting you on the podcast today, I was also excited because you and I, we've never really talked about being on The Bachelor, going through everything. You and I really have never publicly gotten together before.
No, I know. And privately, though, there were many late night phone calls and WTF texts and screenshots and all sorts of things of being like, what is going on? And I will say this, like, and I think I've said it before too, and like what you went through and what I had to go through, just having somebody who was there for me and supporting and an ear and a shoulder, with the ability to like say, hey, you're going to have to own, like you have to take responsibility or you have to own this and just be a good friend. I can't say thank you enough for that. Yeah.
Well, you're very welcome. And, you know, I always say, if you love somebody and they are your friend, they're your friend, good, bad, ugly, you know, good press, bad press, we got to get through it, and you get through it together. And there were some dark times, and I appreciated how you did own up to everything, and we got through it. And same thing with me, you guys, you, and then now Jordan were there when Lauren and I went through the melee we went through, and you get through this stuff together, and you learn, and you try to have grace and love, and here we are. And it's, you know, it's the things that those stories and everything is what made us who we are. And it's gotten us to this point today.
For sure. Yeah. I think, look, like anything in life, things are complicated and layered and complex. And there's not a straight single answer that a lot of people are looking for. And I know very much like that was for sure my journey. And just knowing the little glimpse of 3 shows in 1 year that I got to do and be a part of, like it's a beast of a franchise, and it's a huge undertaking. It's a huge toll on your body physically and mentally. So it's just, my heart always goes out to anybody who goes through that. You know, it's just it's a hard commitment. It's not as easy as people think.
Do you know, this might be a weird question because you might redo it, but do you regret doing it? Or do you respect the fact that it took that to get you to where you are today?
You know, I've been asked that before, and I really, truly at this point, you know, I can always admit that I have regrets. I think I appreciate that I did have to go through that. And I think I strategically put myself through that to try to be straight so badly because I wanted that so badly.
Yeah.
And look, I do think there is a good chance, like if I didn't go through that, like I wouldn't be here on this earth. Like and that sounds really sad and messed up to say, but like if I didn't have that experience, like I just wouldn't have survived. And you know, mixing the global pandemic and quarantining and then coming out during the pandemic, just on top of it, it's complicated. So I guess like the short answer is like, no, I wish I wouldn't have, like for a lot of people's sakes, I would have saved a lot of people time, but also like if anybody can learn and look at my point of view, in my opinion, it saved my life and it allowed me to live the life that I would like always wanted, but never thought I could live. So I think like there is some beauty in that.
I was curious if you ever came close during filming to just saying, hey, I tried. I'm trying to be this person. I'm realizing I'm not. Or did you not have that realization yet?
No, I mean, look, deep down, I knew I was gay while we were filming. But there
Right.
was also a part of me, maybe not as deep down, that felt like I could possibly change. Like there was hope. It was confusing because I was still feeling like I had an attractive level to women, but there was never space and an opportunity. And this is not on you as like the host of the show, but I never felt comfortable approaching you and or production and saying, I'm struggling with my sexuality here. Like,
Yeah.
let's have this conversation. And I don't
Wow.
I don't even know if you would have been able to like handle that of basically being like, holy crap.
I would like to think that the show could have, but deep down, I know it wouldn't have. And I hate to say that. And it's not a dig at the show. It's just not what that does. It's not what they're there for. And I think it would have been bastardized and exploited. And I mean, hell, they tried anyway, even without your blessing. I mean, that was the whole Billy Eichner comment. He didn't come up with that comment. He was told to say that. You and I have had these discussions. You know how they tried to, they had their suspicions and tried to out you and throughout the show. And so, I would love to have said, hey, I wish you had stopped me on the beach when we were jogging one day in Vietnam and said, hey, man, can we have this conversation? You and I could have, but I don't think it would have been handled better on the show.
I agree. And I think there is a part that I was so in it too, that I really didn't fully understand who I could and could trust. I think that's also, as you know, too, like, I think there was the one moment where after like I jumped the fence and the next day I came back and we sat down and I looked at you and you, like the first two questions were great. And I felt like we were in this conversation. All of a sudden I like get a pickup and I see, you're wearing your in-ear. And I was like, Chris, can you take the in-ear out and like, let's just have a conversation here. And you're like, yeah. And you took it out and hit it. And you were like, and that I always appreciate it. And that from that moment, I knew I could trust you. Because I was like, okay, here's somebody who values me and my life and my story and what I'm going through over making a good TV show. So like I now I know that I could trust you, but back then when we were on that beach running around, I was like, there would have been no space for me to know who I couldn't and could trust.
And that's very fair. I definitely would have told you to feel the same way. I mean, it's, because you're doing a show and, I always, the show can catch a lot of grief for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they are doing something that is it's a business to make money, and you are part of that business making money. And it's odd because yes, it's our lives and it's artistic and there's all these other layers to it. But at the end of the day, it's a job and you're hired essentially to do a job, even if that job is to fall in love. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And I always try to tell people, you got to understand the Coltons and the Hannahs and all these people of the world. Yeah, they signed up for this, but don't give me they should know what they're getting themselves into, because it's just, you don't know until you're in the middle of it. And it's different for everybody.
Totally. I mean, that's the thing. And I think for people to understand too, like most of these leads right now, when they get tapped to lead that show, are in their 20s. I mean, like, I especially was emotionally stunted because of sports. And I'm like, look, I know you have a son who is in lacrosse and committed to that sport, very dedicated. But I know he also has a girlfriend. But like for me, I just didn't. I avoided relationships and I avoided like trying to figure out like my emotional growth. So by the time I was a bachelor, yes, I was like 25, 26 when I did that show. Emotionally, though, I was still a teenager. I was still immature. Didn't really know what I was looking for. Probably shouldn't have been in that position. But also, it was like this is an opportunity of a lifetime that, for many different reasons, that I'm looking for. But yeah,
I mean, there's always layers to a person being the bachelor or bachelorette. But you and I have had long discussions about this, and I've thought long and hard about it. I mean, because it's like being a child star. You were a sports star. You went to the NFL. The 0.001% make it to the NFL. But it also, you kind of stop growing because you are so worried about growing to be an athlete, and you got this thing. And so this other part of you kind of stops, and the rest kept going. And so you're a grown man, you're playing in the NFL, and then all of a sudden you're the bachelor. It's like, but this other part of you never had a chance to catch up. And that's what kind of slingshot. And I think it took the bachelor. And again, I'm with you. I think at the end of the day, I would say don't regret that. Yeah, sure, you can apologize and you wish it had gone better for certain people, but at the end of the day, it caused you to catch up and the scales got to even out a little bit for you.
I would definitely agree with that. I think that's a great way to put it. I never thought of it like that. But yeah, it was very much I prioritized a different career than I did like my own personal growth. And all of a sudden I'm in this intense year of filming Bachelorette, Bachelor in Paradise, Bachelor, and doing all of this self work. And that's also why I somewhat am at peace with even the women who were on my season. I feel like they also went through a lot of self work too, and they got out what they wanted out of that show too, you know? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I do hear that or see comments every once in a while being like, you wasted so many women's time. I'm like, they had a good time and traveled the world with me. Yeah, it's complicated.
And by the way, it only was going to end up good for, 99% of the people that come on the show don't end up with somebody. That's I'm not a big believer in all that. I mean, if you had that understanding and you came in to fool everybody and you actually showed up to deceive us all, that's one thing. But having that realization later, there's not much difference than that. And say Bob Guinea finding out later, you know what, I'm not ready for a relationship. Did he waste everybody's time? Technically, but he didn't do it to deceive anybody. You weren't being malicious. That wasn't in your heart at the time.
No, there was lots of cries for help. That's sort of what I'm realizing is it was like my subconscious basically being like, help me come out, help me get through this. Tell me what's right. Tell me what's wrong. What do we need to do?
Match your symptom every home. Join Lisa and her handy show set on the Tropical
24 ASCO annual meeting and
Was there anything as you look back, because a lot of people have come on the podcast and they've said, I had a question for you. I've always wondered this, and you and I have had a lot of these conversations, but I'm just curious if there's still anything that sticks out to you that you wonder about with the show, with me, or anything that happened.
Most of them I've already asked you. I was so paranoid though, like just because, and I've publicly said this before too, like, I did have not a relationship, but like a physical relationship with a man before like I went on to that show. So I was always so paranoid, but the majority, and this is the sad part, and also what I want people to realize is like that easily could have been me. Most of those men who I had some sort of physical connection with were married with families and like in a similar position that I was like in. And my thought process behind that was, if they're going to out me, they have to have just as much, if not more, to lose than what I had. So I was always sort of operating with so much anxiety while we were filming that show and while that show was airing and while I was doing press, that there would be like that one person who like emails a producer and been like, I know he hooked up with my friend, here in this state. And so that was always something that I was a little nervous about. And I don't think it's like necessarily questions. It's more so too like the way that my virginity was handled. Like, of course, like I would have loved to give a straight answer of why I was a virgin. I hid behind my faith. I hid behind football. I hid behind, this because you had to ask me 10 million times on the show and I would give you a different answer every time you asked me. And they're like, everybody's like, I remember like there's people who even publicly were like, why is he a virgin again? And I'm like, because I couldn't say I'm questioning my sexuality to Chris.
Yes.
So I had to say all of these other things. Now that I've been in this industry for a little bit, that's a machine of a franchise, and you have to do some savage things to get to that level. And now I have a better understanding of what they do and how they operate and who they are. And I've also had the privilege and opportunity to work with other production companies since that, and know that that's not the norm. I think that was the cool thing about getting out. Love it, appreciate it for what it did and taught me, but also realize it's just not for me. Like the way that they roll is not how I want to roll and not how I want to do business. And I feel like you can still entertain people and put on a good show and take care of those people too.
Yeah, and you can, and that's happening, and that's what's happening more and more. And so it's I had to take people aside when they came on the show and tell them when they were new, look, I know you've been in the business for a while. We do television unlike anybody's ever done television. And some of it's just a victim of our success. Like a lot of these people grew up, they were 18, 19, 20 years old. They started working on the show because it was a nothing show. And then they stayed on the show for 20 years. And so they never really learned anywhere else to bring kind of the technical TV skills in. So they just created this system. And so we did things a lot of times in a very backwards way, but it's the way we did it. And so, you know, and I went off and did Millionaire or, you know, Spelling Bee, and I did a million other shows. And so, I mean, I had a lot of experience. And so I knew when I came back to The Bachelor, this is how we do television. It's very backwards in the way producers ran the show, and as opposed to a director, et cetera. It was very interesting. And you're right. It doesn't have to be that way. And it's not on a lot of places, but I always said they're just a victim of their own success. And totally. It's not a terrible thing. They've been, you know, going for 20 years now. So, it is what it is. Do you keep up with the franchise at all? Do you still watch? Do you know what's happening?
I don't. I know what's happening because I'm on social media and I see things. Like I saw, obviously, you know, the success of Golden Bachelor. I also saw they broke up immediately after. You know, I definitely see it. I don't tune in. I don't watch. I have, you know, a texting relationship with a few of the producers over there, and I'm at peace now with it. Like I have zero ill will towards them. I'm actually appreciative of like what I've gone through and what they've been through. I think hopefully they've learned a few things. I know a few people have been in and out of working for them now. So I keep up a little bit, but I want to go back because one thing that always stood out to me that you told me on the day that we shot our promo photos for the season, you said, hey, I'm Chris. I just want to like introduce myself. And like you leaned in and you were like, pick your battles wisely. He's like, choose your battles wisely. And I was like, okay. So that was sort of my mantra through this whole thing is like, anytime I wanted to get upset or being like fight and resist it, I had to remind myself, okay, is this worth it? And there were very few moments where I was like, okay, this is worth it. And then I think you saw the mountain explode in Portugal when I finally jumped the fence. I was like, okay, I cannot do this. But yeah, you always gave good advice.
Yeah, I know. I did mean that because I saw bachelors and bachelorettes that would fight for everything. And, you know, it's one of those old sayings, if you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. And, you know, you can't win and fight every battle every day because they're shooting a show. And I told you this, and I told every bachelor and bachelorette, I said, look, you have to give a little. There's things we have to do to shoot a television show. But if it's something that means enough to you, then hold your ground and dig in. And that's the hill you got to be willing to die on. And Portugal was the hill you were willing to die on.
I was willing to die on that fence for sure.
Yes, you did. Instead, you just cleared it and off into the wilderness. Well, hey, I know you're in New York, and is Jordan with you? You guys heading to a show?
Yeah, we're going to a Broadway show tonight, and then doing dinner, and we're really just like taking this moment for ourselves. Like we came out. We were both in DC for some work. I'm still doing some lobbying for a mental health bill that I'm working on, and Jordan obviously is gearing up. He does a lot of social impact around politics, and there's a lot going on in our country right now, unfortunately. So we're working to just continue to try to serve as bridges to many different people's cultures, communities, and but right now we're sort of just wrapping each other with love and enjoying where we're at.
Well, you know, it would have been easy for you guys after you got married to just disappear and never be heard from again, but to use what you have for good and to be a bridge for hope, for good, for love, and all that it's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. And not everyone will see it like that, but that's not your job. Your job is not to try and convince everybody, but I appreciate what you guys do. And I always appreciate your time. And more importantly, always appreciate your friendship.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you and Lauren both. And I know Jordan wanted me to tell you hello and her hello as well. So, yeah, I can't wait for our next hang, whether we're in Austin or you're out in LA.
Likewise. And I can't wait for that first family meal when we're there and you guys have the baby and y'all are just getting spit up on and food's everywhere. And Lauren and I just get to sit there and have our glass of wine and I just get to relish.
I've been through this, buddy. Yeah.
It's the best of things. It's the worst of things. Get some sleep because October will come quickly. Love you guys. All the best. And I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening. follow us on Instagram at The Most Dramatic Pod Ever. And make sure to write us a review and leave us 5 stars. I'll talk to you next time.